Trump's press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, took to the press secretary podium to melt down over the fact that Democrats weren't nice enough at Trump's State of the Union address. Now, you must be thinking, is she really this upset? She describes it as the most shameful moment in presidential address history, which just may be true, just not for the reasons that she thinks that it is. And how could you possibly complain after Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert were jumping up and down screaming at Biden during his speech? I don't know. There was one heckle with Al Green, and then aside from that, they just weren't standing for stuff, as always is the case with these speeches. But nevertheless, Karoline Leavitt echoed her boss. I'll show you Trump's reaction as well, and had this to say. If you appreciate the show, as always, please do click the subscribe button.
And as President Trump asked in his speech last night, how could anyone possibly be opposed to any of this action that he is taking? Well, apparently, the modern-day Democrat Party could. The behavior of Democrats last night was completely disgraceful and demonstrated how severely out of touch they are with the American public. It was the most shameful moment in the history of presidential addresses in that beautiful chamber. And what was supposed to be a unifying moment for our country, Democrat members of Congress instead screamed at the President of the United States, who was just overwhelmingly reelected by their constituents, walked out of the chamber, and worst of all, they disrespected the American people.
Who would ever heckle a president while they're delivering a State of the Union or a speech to the joint session of Congress? Who would think of doing such a... What's that, Jade?
Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority.
Referencing literally the plan that Rick Scott put on paper that uses that word, but okay. No!
I give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, of course, getting ready to go to the Arctic.
That means Congress doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see you.
A liar! I didn't hear any of that from the Democrats. Liar!
Doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see you. No, I tell you, I enjoy conversion. You know, it means if Congress doesn't keep the programs the way they are, they'd go away. Other Republicans say, I'm not saying it's a majority of you. I don't even think it's even a significant, but it's being proposed by individuals. I'm not politely not naming them, but it's being proposed by some of you. Look.
What? What are you talking about? You know what? I'll take his lead and politely not name them either, Rick Scott, because we wouldn't want to call out Rick Scott. We wouldn't want to say the name of the person, Rick Scott, that proposed such a thing. But apparently, to Karoline Leavitt, this was so disgraceful, like nothing we'd ever seen before, because Al Green said some stuff and then walked out with the sergeant at arms, and then the other Democrats just sat there mostly quietly. One time they laughed because Trump said that the time of unelected bureaucrats reigning is over, even though he's given more power than ever to an unelected bureaucrat, Elon Musk. But, you know, Leavitt there is just taking the lead of Donald Trump, who said the Democrats should lose the midterms based on their behavior at last night's joint address to Congress. And I'll sort of leave it up to you to judge the differences in sort of the character exhibited in the reaction to the reaction from the president. Meaning, Biden handled the rage from Republicans, I'd say, much better, even just in a PR sense, than Trump did. But reporters are speaking out now increasingly about the chilling environment with the press secretary's announcement that they're taking over the power that used to be partly wielded by the White House Correspondents Association, all of the lies that are being told at that podium, and then how the administration that Leavitt represents is brazenly attacking freedom of the press. And Marty Barron, an ex-Washington Post editor, broke it down this way.
I expected the worst, but now I realize that my concept of the worst was not the worst. It's worse than what I thought would be the worst. I did expect an all-out attack on the press. I didn't expect some of the things that he was doing. I didn't think that he would decide who to name to the White House pool, for example. I did expect aggressive behavior on the part of the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission to threaten the licenses of stations affiliated with the major networks. Actually, most of the major networks, excluding, of course, Fox News. So that's not being threatened whatsoever. I'm stunned by the degree to which he has essentially used his government power to try to extract settlements in the private litigation that he brought against ABC and CBS. So now, ABC's, of course, settled, I think largely because its parent company, Disney, did not want to be in conflict with the new president of the United States. But now, clearly, the signal to Paramount and the company with which it hopes to merge, Skydance, is that we may not approve that merger if you don't settle this litigation. And a settlement in that litigation means money for Donald Trump. And he wants a lot of money. It's really extraordinary to use the power of government to extract substantial settlements in private litigation. By any measure, that would be considered an abuse of power. A corrupt abuse of power, and I think that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing today, and so I think we're seeing worse than what I imagined, and we'll see a lot. We'll see a lot more too. There will be many more lawsuits. There will be lawsuits by his friends and his allies, very wealthy friends who can underwrite.
With the amount that's going on, many have described it like, trying to drink water out of a fire hose. With the amount of news that's just pouring out, it's hard to give the due attention to each thing, which is why a lot of times these segments, I'll give you something and then rapid fire through a bunch of other stuff, because there's so much happening and all of it's so important. And in any normal political environment, we would spend the entire day talking about just what he talked about, which is that Trump, and then, through his mouthpiece, Karoline Leavitt, as she tries to defend these things, as you saw there at the top of the segment, there is just a brazen, unforgiving, unrelenting attack on the press. Now, I think one of the most shameful acts as it pertains to the relationship between the press and the presidency in American history is Trump having his FCC get in the way of this merger, similar to how ABC was afraid of what could be done, or their parent company Disney, what could be done to them by Trump if they didn't settle and just pay Trump money. And so essentially what he's doing is he's saying, you can buy me off. You can pay me through this settlement over the Kamala Harris interview lie that Trump created, and you could pay me billions of dollars in the settlement, or I will prevent you from making a bunch of money. Those are your options. I will use the power of this office, and I will get rid of the independence that was supposed to be there with the FCC to do so that you have to do what I want and you have to pay me. You got to pay me to get what you want, because it is technically a private lawsuit. So he would be getting paid privately as an individual, but he's using his governmental power to strong arm CBS or Paramount into doing so. And this is just the beginning, not to mention the investigations the FCC has been opening up. They, as was mentioned there by the ex-Washington Post editor, it's really interesting that they just happen to be interested in investigating the outlets that Trump doesn't like and not so interested in investigating the outlets that Trump likes. This is not the constitutional approach to governance that we should be able to take for granted, but clearly we can't. Now, Axios reports as a little update, Trump did it again. He paused Mexican tariffs. I don't even know. I see that sometimes with our YouTube metrics, we'll see that people will go back and watch videos, sort of like binging old videos. I cannot imagine how confusing it is if you're not keeping up with this every single second. Imagine going back and watching some of these videos and getting mixed up on the dates. What are we talking? Is this the first pause, second pause? What? This is Trump after saying full steam ahead, nothing Mexico or Canada can do. He's pausing them again on at least Mexico. Do you know the impossibility of running a business when your business relies on imports from Mexico or Canada in this environment? That's why we're seeing, as we're going to get into in other segments today, the frightening predictions about jobs numbers. Obviously, we've talked about the GDP. Obviously, we've talked about stock market, and then personal testimony from a viewer. But this is what you do if you actively wanted to damage the ability for a functioning economy. President Trump said on Thursday he would pause most tariffs on exports from Mexico until April 2nd. But, they're going to start back up, at least the reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd. So just don't make any long-term plans. Don't rely on economic stability, which is the cornerstone of thoughtful business running. He posted after speaking with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico, "I have agreed that Mexico will not be required to pay tariffs on anything that falls under the USMCA agreement. This agreement is until April 2nd. I did this as an accommodation and out of respect for President Sheinbaum. Our relationship has been a very good one, and we're working hard together on the border, both in terms of stopping illegal aliens from entering the United States and likewise stopping fentanyl. Thank you to President Sheinbaum for your hard work and cooperation." Yeah, but see, you said that separate from that issue, the tariffs were necessary. You said people should plan for the temporary hardship, which could mean layoffs, which we're hearing companies doing and planning for. You said that instability was necessary because there was some economic gain. And Sheinbaum's been working without these tariff threats, or I should say the Mexican government has been working, regardless of these tariff threats, with the U.S. government and been making big gains, which is why Trump inherited a much better situation at the border than he would have otherwise. There have been huge gains in coordination and cooperation in the months leading up to Trump taking office. And we didn't need to harm the U.S. economy in a massive way to do so. This is wildly confusing. Jim Cramer, even as I showed you on CNBC, was saying there's just chaos. You can't act like there's rhyme or reason to this. There's not. And what's happening actually is whatever perceived benefits Trump would argue come from the tariff approach, this stopping and starting approach is almost a way of getting all of the negatives without the positives. Because the countries are still realizing they can't rely on us as an economic partner. Him saying the USMCA, I guess he's making accommodations because he's the one violating the trade agreement that he signed. So he's trying to get around that. That's why he accuses Canada of a fentanyl problem that's not really there. And I'll get to that in a second. But he's encouraging these countries to take U.S. products off their shelves. He's pushing them away from buying from us, as they've announced. And so U.S. companies are getting hurt, but then he's still releasing the quote unquote economic pressure on those countries. So it's mostly hurting us without even doing the hurting of them that he says is necessary. It's not. But in every way, even using his standard, it's just hurtful to us. Trump also posted, "Justin Trudeau of Canada called me to ask what could be done about tariffs. I told him that many people have died from fentanyl that came through the borders of Canada and Mexico, and nothing has convinced me that it has stopped. He said that it's gotten better, but I said that's not enough. The call ended in a somewhat friendly manner. He was unable to tell me when the Canadian election is taking place, which made me curious, like, what's going on here? I then realized he's trying to use this issue to stay in power. Good luck, Justin, but you're the one who created the issue." He also posted, "Please explain to Governor Trudeau of Canada that when he puts on a retaliatory tariff on the U.S., our reciprocal tariff will immediately increase by a like amount." So apparently we're still raging forward with the Canadian trade war, while we have another month to wait on the Mexican one charging forward. But who knows, maybe once I post this, Trump will have paused the Canadian one, saying that something great was attained that wasn't. Meanwhile, again, they're not stopping. The reports are that it's not stopping, understandably, on the Canadian side, them cutting off connections to us, cutting off the benefits from us, the biggest purchaser of alcohol abroad. Cutting that off, hurting U.S. companies. U.S. companies not knowing what is to come next. You then have Alberta Premier Daniel Smith saying this about Trump's claims.
At our border appears to be drugs coming up from Canada or from the U.S. into Canada, whether it's cocaine or crystal meth. The issue of migrants seems to be exclusively people coming across from the United States into Canada. A woman in the room said that she, 2 or 3 times a year she sees families with suitcases. And I asked the room full of about 200 people how many people experience the same, and almost everyone lifted their hands. So there are hundreds of people potentially who are coming across from the United States into Canada, and we are not seeing the same in reverse. So what we are asking for is some recognition that with the additional enforcements we put at the border, our interdiction teams, the sniffer dogs, the vehicle inspection, the drones, and the Black Hawk helicopters, that's a demonstration that we're doing our part. We're wanting the U.S. to match our efforts as well. And let's stamp out the scourge of fentanyl. We all want to eliminate.
Yeah, so what's interesting is, as someone who unfortunately has to consume a lot of right-wing media to prepare for this show and learn what their arguments are, what you're seeing in the faces of, as I reviewed with you yesterday, right-wing media personalities is utter panic and confusion because they don't know. Donald Trump has announced that he's charging forward with the economically beneficial tariffs that won't actually cause pain, but maybe temporary, but it'll also be awesome. So get ready for that. And we have breaking news that actually he's lifting them on Mexico because this was actually a genius negotiating tactic, which he got a bunch of stuff that I can't yet list off for you, but I know that it's there for sure. Oh, never mind. He said that they're permanent again. That's actually economically. Oh, no, he paused them, which means they definitely would have been bad economically, which he knew the whole time, which I knew the whole time, which they would have caused inflation, but I defended them because I knew they were negotiating tactic. It's very confusing. And what investors rely on, what businesses rely on, what workers rely on is economic stability. And Trump is finding a way through his tariff policy, not just to hurt us through the traditional way, which would be the tariffs, increasing prices, and alienating the allies. But he's finding out a way to make it even worse, where he doesn't even affect the supply chains like he's saying he would, but he still causes the economic uncertainty and isolation of our allies that hurt U.S. businesses. One other update: in an unsigned 5-4 emergency ruling, Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett joined the court's 3 liberals to uphold the decision by the Biden-appointed Judge Amir Ali to unfreeze nearly $2 billion in payments from the U.S. Agency for International Development pledged under previous administrations. I'm stunned, Justice Samuel Alito wrote in a dissent signed by the bench's other 3 conservatives. I saw one piece write that it seems we're just one more MAGA justice away from utter loyalty, even though here, one of the people that Trump appointed at least sided with the liberal justices to say, no, legally apportioned funds have to still go there. What are you doing? You don't have unilateral control over the entire lawmaking of the federal government, Donald. You have to execute the law. You have influence over it with your veto power, but you can't unilaterally control it. And even our super conservative Supreme Court has agreed with what I've been saying, which is that this freezing of funds in the manner that the Trump administration has been doing it, the shutting down of agencies without congressional approval, is indeed against the law. And now even Amy agrees. Share your thoughts in the comments.